Now we're going to move over to the tank top itself. Now we're at the top of the underground storage tank, and looking inside this is called a submersible tank sump. So once again, it's a containment vessel on top of the tank. Inside there is your submersible pump, which pumps the fuel from the underground storage tank into the piping and takes it to be delivered to whatever dispensers and nozzles are dispensing the fuel at that time. This one here is colored blue. It's a particular manufacturer. Of these different submersibles that are out there, there's two manufacturers that make them in the United States, and within those two manufacturers, there's a couple variations. So once again, depending on what type of fuel you're going to dispense, it's important that you choose the correct submersible. You could buy a plain Jane cheap one, but the problem is our fuels are changing. We're having problems with biomaterial bugs getting in and causing corrosion and rusting. So that's an issue we're addressing. And then we also have markets growing. Our cars are going to be using more and more ethanol as time goes on. So once again, you're better off choosing a submersible that will be equipped to be compatible and listed to accommodate those fuels. It's not that much more money, especially in the long term. But once again, if you buy something like they call a variable speed submersible, you're actually getting a better submersible that is smart, that could ramp up speed. It knows how many gas nozzles are dispensing at the same time, and it will adjust its pumping speed to accommodate that. And the manufacturers were smart when they came out with this new type of submersible. They automatically got it UL listed to be compatible with all levels of ethanol. So those are things to be taken into consideration. Once again, also inside that tank sump, there's going to be a sensor. That way, if there's any type of release within that sump itself, or somewhere within the piping itself up to the dispensers, that release will channel back to that sump. It will hit that sensor and it will send an alarm off to the console inside the C-store or building. Also within that sump, you see another flex connector. Typically in our industry, if you're using rigid pipe, anytime you have less than a 4-foot run, we're required by practice to put in what we call a flex connector. And what that allows to do is that it allows it to flex and vibrate and shake, which takes and offsets what we call line shock. So at home, sometimes you shut off the water, you hear the pipes rattle in the wall. That's line shock. So we put flex connectors in any type of sump or environment where we have less than a 4-foot run. Also within that sump is going to be a ball valve. And what the ball valve does, it's like a faucet. It's on the outside of that submersible, and it's on the piping before it leaves that sump to go to the dispensers. What that ball valve does is allows the contractor, if they need to do any type of work, is to shut that valve so that no product inside that piping flows backwards into the sump. As a standard practice, we've been using brass ball valves as a standard because it's the most price competitive product. But that is only UL listed and compatible for up to E10. We're also finding with the microbe issue with diesel and corrosion, more and more companies are deciding for a little bit more money, they're switching over to a stainless steel ball valve as standard practice. On the right is just a pipe alone with a silver steel manhole cover on it. That is the riser pipe for the tank gauge probe. So inside that underground storage tank is a probe. And what that probe does is it has two floats on it. One float rides at the bottom of the tank and one rides at the top. The float on the top is the fuel float. So what that float does is that as a delivery gets from the big tank truck, comes to the gas station, drops a load of gas, that float will ride up to the point once the tank is filled. It will tell the console, the automatic tank gauge inside the C-store, how many gallons of gas that are in there. There's a float at the bottom, and that float differs per product, as does the top float. That float at the bottom is looking for both water and something called phase separation. Both of those things are bad for cars, are bad for engines, so it should really be kept to a minimal. But those floats are in there specifically so that if they rise beyond a certain point, they will send an alarm over to the tank gauge so that will tell you, uh-oh, hey, we got a problem. We have water inside the tank. That's really important. One of my friends up in northern Wisconsin at his tribe store, they had a problem with water and phase separation, and they ended up fixing about 14 car engines that stalled. So that's the probe, ATG probe. The other thing about the probe is that as those floats, the top float goes down. So every time a customer is dispensing gas from the gas pump to his car, obviously that float should start going down a little bit inside the tank. So it actually allows that console to communicate with the what we call the POS system, the cash register, so it can do reconciliation. At the end of the day, they will be able to say that, hey, we sold 600 gallons of gas today, or whatever the number is, and then it should also be able to reconcile back to the automatic tank gauge to show, yeah, we show that in the underground storage tank through the probe and the float, that the tank says that we have 600 gallons less in underground storage tank. So that's an ATG probe and float inside that riser pipe. The middle pipe there and the one to the left are what we call spill buckets. Typically on the top of an underground storage tank are two buckets for gasoline products. One is the fill bucket, so that when that big tank truck comes, they hook up their nozzle to the top of that bucket, and then they hook up a second nozzle to that other bucket. So as they're dropping in the fuel to fill up that underground storage tank, in that bucket to the left would be vapor. They're at the same time, as the gas goes into the underground storage tank, it's through displacement, 1 cubic inch of gas in, 1 cubic inch of vapor out. It's naturally displacing any vapor in that underground storage tank up through that pipe, in through the nozzle, in through the hose, into the tank truck, and the tank wagon's taking that vapor back to the refiner for processing so that they can compress that into more fuel. So the key for us is not so much to recover the fuel, but it's really to prevent those vapors from getting out into the atmosphere, the greenhouse gases, the hydrocarbons. So those are fill and vapor spill buckets. Typically those are 5 gallon. Within those spill buckets, there's an adapter on top. They're called swivel adapters. And then there's a cap on there. So once again, everything we do with the top of that tank, from those threaded nipples at the very top, bottom, all the way up, all that has to be vapor tight and liquid tight. So even the caps and seals. So once again, going back to what I said at the beginning, the importance of these systems is maintenance and inspection. All those components have to be inspected to maintain on a regular basis. Otherwise, it doesn't matter if you use the best materials, the most expensive materials. The minute you don't maintain them and take care of them, they become a problem. And when we talk about 60 components with a fueling system, your fueling system's integrity is only as sound as the weakest component within that system. The fuel and the vapor will always find where you have a weak component. Also within those spill buckets, so for instance, if the gas driver for some reason spills a gallon of gas out of his nozzle into that bucket, we have also the option to have a drain inside that bucket. So the buckets come with two options. One, a drain to the buckets. And when we teach at the classes of the UST boot camps through Oneida and other tribes, we encourage them not to have the valves in the buckets, because when you have a valve in that bucket, you pull it. Besides releasing gas into the underground storage tank, if you have a problem with rainwater getting into your buckets, you're going to be releasing the water and the dirt and debris inside the spill buckets themselves as well. So we encourage that if you're going to build a new site or replace spill buckets, do not get them with the drain valve in there. Get them with the plug. Also tell your delivery guys that, hey, we do not have drain valves in our spill buckets. You need to pay attention to when you're doing a fuel drop, because you will not be able to drain any fuel out of that spill bucket. So this forces better fuel deliveries, and it forces better maintenance, and it also helps keep the fuel in your tank clean. Before we go down, I almost walked right by something that's important. So up here on the pole to the right, you see a little cap up there. It looks like a mushroom cap. That's called a vent. Now that's a standard upper vent for diesel. For gasoline products, because we do not want to release vapor into the air. So on diesel, that actually prevents rainwater from getting down that pipe going into the underground storage tank. What its vent does is it allows the underground storage tank to actually breathe. So when a gas truck comes to drop a load of fuel, it's kind of like when you try pouring gas out of your bucket, or when you try drinking through a straw and you only have one hole in your soda can. You need that second hole to allow the canister to breathe. So that vent allows the tank to breathe. So that vent cap on the top is just what we call a rain vent. With gasoline products, it's called a pressure vacuum vent because we also want to hold the vapors inside the tank. The problem with inside an underground storage tank, you have temperature variations, you have fuel drops. You don't want that tank to get overpressurized. So within that pressure vacuum valve, we have settings that, what I'll use a layman's term, we allow that tank to burp. When the tank gets to a certain pressure and it needs to let go of some vapors, kind of like burping, that check valve inside that pressure vacuum vent will burp and open and allow the tank to burp.